Salvete discipuli. Today we are going to do the first of a few videos in Chapter 2 for Latin for the New Millennium. This first video is going to talk about first and second conjugation verbs, and we're going to talk about an aspect of Latin verbs called principal parts. Okay, so let's first define our terms. A conjugation is a group of verbs that follow the same pattern. Okay, so every verb is going to belong to one of these conjugations, okay, one of these patterns. In a way, a conjugation is analogous to, a conjugation for verbs is analogous to a declension for nouns, right? They all belong to these groups that decline in the same way, whereas, and verbs belong to these groups that conjugate in the same way. The principal parts are the four forms that are necessary to fully conjugate a verb. So in order to put that verb into all of its possible forms, you need its principal parts. Most verbs have four principal parts, but there are what are called defective verbs that only have three. Actually, I can think of a defective verb that only has two principal parts. So most verbs, four principal parts, but we do have some irregular verbs that are going to only have three and even sometimes two. Now, for the most part, right now, we are only going to use the first and second principal parts because those are the ones that we're going to need for the lesson we're learning in this chapter. Okay, so for the next video, you're going to see that we really only use the first two principal parts, okay? However, you still have to memorize all four principal parts because you need the third and the fourth principal part in order to conjugate certain tenses in Latin. And we're going to learn those tenses this year, so if you don't memorize the principal parts, it's going to be so much harder when we finally do learn the perfect, pluperfect, and future perfect tenses to be able to recognize the verb because you didn't bother to learn all four principal parts, and we don't want to do that. Okay, let's talk a little bit more specifically about these principal parts, okay? The first principal part, and I know that some of these words are going to sound really strange to you right now, but you'll get used to them, just like you got used to the nominative and the accusative and all of those words when we talked about nouns. You'll get used to this new vocabulary about that we use to talk about verbs as well. The first principal part is the first person singular present active indicative, okay? And you're going to know what all those things mean in the next video. We're going to talk about indicative, imperative, and infinitive, all in the next video. The second principal part is the present active infinitive. Now, you may not understand what these forms are, but let me tell you why they're important. You need the first principal part because it's going to give you one of the most basic verb forms for a Latin verb. But you need the second principal part for a number of reasons. One, it's the infinitive, so you're going to translate that second principal part, eventually. But in addition to that, the second principal part gives you the present stem. You're going to need the present stem in order to conjugate the present active indicative, the present tense. And the second principal part tells you what conjugation of verb is. So if you need to know what pattern this verb follows, you're going to find that out by looking at its second principal part. All first conjugation verbs end in are in its second principal part. And all second conjugation verbs end in ere, and it's really important that you notice that macron over the e, the first e in the second principal part for second conjugation verbs. The reason for that is because there are a total of 4 conjugations in Latin. We're only doing the first and second for right now, but the third conjugation is an ere without the macron. So you need to be able to differentiate between a second conjugation verb and a third, and it's only that macron in the second principal part that's going to tell you. The fourth principal part ends in an ire, okay? Now, I'm giving you 2 examples here. One is of a first conjugation verb, and one is of a second conjugation verb. It has all 4 principal parts. Each verb is expressed in all 4 principal parts, and you can tell what conjugation they are based on the ending in their second principal part, right? So, here we have the first principal part, the second principal part, the third, and the fourth, okay? The first and the second principal parts are the ones we're going to be using for right now. The second principal part is really important because it's telling us that amare is going to be first conjugation, and it's telling us that videre is going to be second conjugation, right? Now, when you memorize these two words for a vocab quiz, you need to memorize amo, amare, amawi, amatum. This verb happens to mean to love. Also, video, videre, weedy, weesum, which means to see. Okay, I hope that you have taken good notes. Be prepared for me to look at them tomorrow in class, and I hope you have a great evening. Walete.